We're ready to go, Tatiana, live.
We are. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live session hosted in partnership between Angeles Investors and Alpha Denver. We are thrilled to have you with us for this interactive conversation that's designed for both aspiring angel investors and founders. So, whether you're looking to invest in startups or you're a founder hoping to get a better understanding of what investors are looking for, this session is for you. At Alpha Denver, our mission is to empower leaders through professional development, mentorship, and connection. And I, as Tatiana Rivera, am the president of the Alpha Denver chapter. Angeles Investors shares that commitment and helps to close the capital gap by investing in the top Latino founded startups across the US. A bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, just hold them to the end, drop them in the chat or in the comments for the YouTube. And if we don't get to all questions, we encourage you to connect with our guests and join future events hosted by Angeles Investors and Alpha Denver to continue your learning journey. Now, I am honored to introduce our incredible speakers. The first is David Olivencia. David is the CEO and co founder of Angeles Investors and author of Networking Excellence. Before Angeles Investors, David held senior executive positions of increasing responsibility at Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, Ford Motor Company, Oracle, Verizon, Softtech, and Accenture. Armando Somoza is a father, five-time founder, serial entrepreneur, nonprofit executive, and a healing-centered executive coach and artist. His experience in innovation, design strategy, business development, and responsive pedagogy has fueled his 20-plus career of building, launching, and scaling products, programs, and initiatives inside of organizations, as well as launching business ventures that express his vision for impact in the world. Thank you both so much for being here today. Any initial starting words for our audience?
Well, hey, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Tatiana, thanks for your leadership, your strong leadership in pulling this together. Investing is such a key item as it relates to building wealth, supporting our community, supporting our country. So look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, always thrilled to share stories and experience, connect with like-minded folks, expand the community and network, and be inspired by the beautiful stories and experiences of our peers.
I am excited as well. And I know our audiences, both across the Angeles Investor membership and the Alpha Denver membership, are super excited for today's topic. So I'm going to start with you, David. I would love to hear more about your personal journey. What inspired you to start Angeles Investors, and what gap did you see in the ecosystem?
Yeah, well, thank you. So, I spent my career in the technology industry and had a pretty good view on all the technology change that was happening, was going to happen, and had a pretty good view into the future. But I never knew how to participate and take advantage of it. I knew that Facebook, Uber, all these companies like grow, scale, and did massive things and created a lot of wealth and created a lot of wealthy entrepreneurs and created a lot of impact on our world. Frankly, but I never knew how to get in the game. So I get my MBA from the University of Notre Dame, and I fell in love, and I learned about a lot of things, but I learned about startups, and I fell in love with startups. But again, I didn't know how do I get involved and how do I get in the game. And there was this group of angel investors at Notre Dame called the Irish Angels, and about 300 members, amazing leaders, and it's still one of the phenomenal organizations I'm a part of. Joined that organization, and then I started investing in startups. And built this portfolio over the years. I now have invested in about 80 or so startups. And then then I just saw this gap of where I obviously my family's from Puerto Rico, my wife's from Colombia, but I've been involved in a lot of nonprofits like Alpha, and knew what was coming in terms of the demographic shifts and all that stuff. So I knew there was an opportunity to take on this thesis of leveraging our growth to find, fund, and fuel the best ventures in America. All right, leveraging Latino growth for that. So we started that 5 years ago, and that's kind of the how modeled off what I learned at Irish Angels, started it at Angeles, and we've become one of the largest, fastest growing angel investing groups in America. And we also have a venture fund, a $20 million venture fund as well.
That is an incredible story. And absolutely, we hear constantly the Latino, not just in terms of our growth, but our GDP, right? We are, if we, as US Latinos, we were a standalone country, we would be the fifth largest GDP in the world. And so it's more than we are not just the future, we are the present, we are the now. And how do we tap into that collective power of what we can, like you said, find, fund, and fuel. I love a good alliteration, especially in a tagline. So I love that that's what you saw, and that we have to tap into that.
Yeah, and it's a 4 trillion. I mean, you talk about numbers, it's like 4 trillion-ish, right? I mean, it's a big, large number. So yeah, you hit it right on the head, Tatiana.
100%. And I also want to hear from you, because as great as the numbers sound, and they are, we still have so much that is not yet tapped into. And so I want to hear from you. What has been one or two of the biggest challenges you have faced in building Latino focused, in a Latino focused investment network like Angeles?
Yeah, first, I'd say the first challenge is it's very hard to get this off the ground, right? Because you need to pull together investors, right? That may, that this might be, they're pretty new to angel investing. I'd say most of our members, maybe 40, 50% of them, like their first angel check was through this group. So they're not, were learning about this asset class and investing. So you got to pull them together, right? Then you got, on the other side, you got to pull together great startups, right? And then you need this infrastructure that can just make this stuff happen on a regular basis. It's very, 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 very hard to do that and continue to do that all the time. Because if you invite startups and nobody cuts a check, then the startups say, these people aren't for real. They're just, puro blah, blah, blah. They just all talk, no action, right? And then on the other side, if you don't bring good startups to the table, then the investors say, what the heck is this? This is like, and so that was, like, I'd say the first, call it big challenge, to get it off the ground. We were able to do that through some phenomenal board members, founding members that we have, and then our continued growth and membership and sponsors. We got amazing sponsors. So that, I'd say, the first challenge. I'd say then from there, I'd say there's a bit of growing. Then you get, I'd say, growing pains with the other one. You grow, and then you got to fill the team. You got to plan for growth, and so, because we really took off like a rocket. So it's, how do you grow? How do you staff? I'd say would be the second change. And look, and we're navigating the current environment that's out there. And we're doing well. Our members we keep doubling our membership. Our sponsors are still doubling down. So we have a good. So I'd say those were the challenges.
Thank you for sharing those. And I agree with you. I think this is both a challenging time, but if what I've learned is challenge actually is the perfect space for innovation, because you have to become way more savvy, a lot more gritty, and persevere a lot more. And I think as Latinos, we have that. There's something in our DNA, and that is just embedded in how we operate, where we persevere, and a challenge, we love a good challenge. So I am personally excited to see what will happen in the next few years, because I think we will see a lot more innovation, because it is a lot more challenging.
Definitely.
And so with that, I do want to hear from you, Armando, as a founder. You are a 5-time startup entrepreneur, amongst so many more things. Your resume is incredible, Armando. And so as the founder of many ventures, what has your journey taught you about resilience and risk-taking?
It's such a great question, and you're too kind with your words, Tatiana. Thank you. It's first and foremost, it's been a wild journey. It's a journey of I've been one that has taken big swings. I've had some amazing wins and some beautiful things that I've been able to manifest and accomplish and build. And I've had some massive losses, some big, the peaks and the valleys are great, in that way. One thing that I've learned and I've grown to be comfortable with is what is success, and what does it mean to have the courage, the tenacity, the resilience to put an idea into the world, to equip it, to strengthen it, to build infrastructure around it, to align talent, to connect and combine resources, and to activate and move all of these moving pieces in a direction that starts to gain some traction and starts to have some momentum, you know. And I think I've had a number of repetitions, you know, and attempts of doing that, and have learned so much. I think one of the biggest thing that I've learned is that it's not so much a fear of failure anymore. I'm not afraid to fail, because failure is fundamentally just a part of it. And, you know, there really kind of is no such thing as failure in those things. Sometimes you hear that as a cliche. The thing that I have learned, which has been challenging, is that I've needed to build a process where I have enough distance from, I can be objective enough from the idea or the concept to then be able to surface the lessons in what that experience was, right? Sometimes we get so close, and especially as founders, a lot of founders are very mission-driven, purpose-driven. They're really close, and it's really difficult to separate identity from the thing that you're doing. And for me, one of the biggest things that I've learned as a creative and as an artist and as an entrepreneur is I'm not the thing I build. I'm not what I built. I am my own being, and the things that I build are expressions in these moments. Call them art pieces, call them paintings, call them, you know, music pieces, whatever, call them compositions. You know, these are expressions of my identity. They're not my identity. They're not who I am. And I think it's taken me now, you know, I've done it 5 times, you know, I've launched, you know, 5 different ventures in the world. And, you know, I think it's after those repetitions, I've been able to gain enough objectivity and enough distance from it to then have kind of more of that, that perspective, you know?
That's incredibly powerful, Armando. And I commend you for your ability to just say, you know, the failures are part of the process. As the first generation oldest daughter of immigrants, failure is so scary for me. And I understand it. You know, doing that, and David, you mentioned this as well with Angeles. Alpha Denver is a relatively new chapter, even though Alpha as an organization has been around for a long time. And so I resonate with both of what you're saying and sharing around building infrastructure, the growing pains, separating yourself from, yes, I'm leading this organization or part of this, but it is not me. That those are all very powerful lessons. And so thank you for sharing that, Armando. Second question for you, Armando, is if you could go back, or if there was something that you wish you knew earlier in your journey as an entrepreneur, especially around the topic of, you know, what it takes to pitch or to get in front of investors, what do you wish you knew earlier?
You know, my experience has taught me kind of an interesting twist on a saying that we hear all the time. You hear in so many different sectors and spaces, and especially in the entrepreneurship space, you know, fake it till you make it, right? It's kind of like, you know, fake it till you make it, like perform the part until you finally kind of manifest it. I actually learned how that benefits a very specific demographic. And I would say in the investment space, in the VC space, in the capital space, it's a very white dominant, male dominated industry and space and sector, right? And I think there's a certain benefit to folks who present as white, who present in that kind of image, in that orientation, where people are allowed to fail up and fail forward. If you're white presenting and if you're in this space, there's an extra leeway for founders of color, for Black and brown funders, for women funders. You don't have that grace. You don't have that belief and that trust. You're not allowed to fail up. You have to prove yourself over and over and over and over and over and over again. And even when what success is, when you define what success looks like, the goalposts continue to move. And that was one of the biggest challenges that I've faced. And so instead of faking it until you make it, I think face it until you learn it is what I've learned. You know, face it until you learn it. Don't fake it until you make it. You can't just perform leadership if you're a Black or brown or woman founder, you know, in that way, or coming from an underrepresented community in that way that doesn't have that ease of access to capital. You don't have the benefit of the doubt. You don't have that kind of leniency in that way. So what I've adopted is face it until you learn it. And I think that centered more in my integrity, that centered more in quicker iteration cycles, that centered more in like learning and pivoting, in making choices, not in second guessing oneself. I think faking it until you make it also enforces imposter syndrome in really harmful ways, versus facing it until you learn it. I think centers you in your agency. It centers you in your power. Helps you identify what's in your control and what's outside of your control, and to be able to orient and focus on what those things are, in that way, so that we're not spending time wasting on things that we can't, time, energy, and effort, resources on things that we can't control, and really centering in what it is that we can control. So I think for me, it's taken, like I've mentioned, a number of reps to then orient myself in this way. And I wish I would have known that when I was younger. I think, you hear, I kind of followed some of the like industry rhetoric, in those ways. And quite honestly, it's a mismatch to Black and brown founders and women founders, underrepresented founders. It's not the same experience, and I had to go through it multiple times to learn that there is another way, and there has to be another way. We can't operate by the same rule set or guidelines.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. And again, it's resonating. And while this is a different topic and we won't delve deeply into it, what comes to mind when you share that is the need for mentorship and leadership. And like you said, I can't just fake that I'm a leader. It's, and what you said, getting some agency and what our gaps are, and understanding what's within our control and what isn't. And within that is, well, if I am missing, maybe I don't have the leadership, or maybe I don't have the executive presence, or maybe I haven't learned how to get in front of an audience. Instead of going up there and, like you said, faking it, it does force you to say, well, how can I learn the skill? And then tap into leaders and mentors and peers who will coach you through that so that you fill the gap. And I think, if anything, full circle, coming back to the point earlier where it just equips us to be more successful, because then we've learned it and we don't have to fake it. We are it. And that only serves us for the better. If we don't have to, I don't have to go and fake and tell you something that you're going to question. You can't poke holes in something that I know I've already worked on and, like you said, faced and addressed, to make sure that there's nothing fake here. It's all well earned. So thank you for sharing that, Armando. I do want to now focus this next part of the conversation on a little bit more of a technical conversation, right? So what is angel investing, and what are those fundamentals? So David, I'm going to bring it back to you and ask you that question. What is angel investing?
Yeah, so angel investing is where you take your own capital and you put it in, you invest in startups. It's a high risk, there's all these asset classes: stocks, bonds, cash, real estate. This asset class it's what they call a very high risk, high reward. So you can invest, you can invest in lots of these. Many of them are going to go to zero and you're going to lose it all. And then you're going to get some that give you 5, 10, 100, 200, X. But if you do that across a portfolio of startups, you can get outsized returns. You can do everybody who's listening can do your own research, go to AI. But if you have a well-diversified portfolio that you do good due diligence on, you can get roughly the numbers 26, 27, 20 IRR, internal rate of return, on your money, which is great. It's a good return. But there's all kind of caveats underneath there as well. Angel investing, you can do it as an individual. So there can be a startup pitching. I can cut my own check if they're willing to take a check of whatever size I plan on giving. A lot of founders have minimums on checks that they're going to let people come in at, and you're talking like, I don't know, 20, 50, 100. The more exits a founder has, like Armando, he can probably command a higher level of first checks, hundreds and thousands of dollars. So you can invest as an individual, you can angel invest as an individual, or you can do it as a group. And there's a lot of benefits to doing it as a group, because the group, helps you find great deals that, remember, I was talking about earlier. The group helps you then do due diligence on those deals, right? So the startup founders, it can be hard to fake it with us because we do very, very, very tough due diligence. And then as a group, we also invest. We pool our money together and we create what they call an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. And then you invest directly in the startup. And then as a group, you also help that startup grow. So, at Angeles, right, we got an amazing network. We help connect our startups. We help open doors for them, give them advice, help them hire people, serve on their boards and other things to help them grow and scale. And the last part we do as a group is when they're successful, you celebrate. When they're successful and they do that, you celebrate as a group, right? Because you can celebrate, write a check by yourself. It's cool, but there's nothing better than celebrating as a group. So that's a little bit about angel investing and why I believe it's more important to do it as a group versus an individual.
Thank you so much. And I heard you say it a couple times in there, that due diligence. So I would love to hear, what is your practical investment checklist? Can you give us, in a few minutes, just what does that due diligence look like, and what can aspiring investors, angel investors, start to think about or start to look for as they maybe assess some startups to invest in?
Yeah, Tatiana, so I've invested in about 80 startups, and I've had some failures. And anybody who's done this would, and actually you learn most from the failures. I've had 3 unicorns and 10 over 100 million in valuation. So I've been able to see some things and get some pattern recognition. And so there's a couple things that we do due diligence on, right? And there's an acronym, I call it TIME, right? So I look at the team and the founder, right? And do all kinds of due diligence and background on the founder. I look at what they're putting on social media. They're putting stuff about politics and stuff that has nothing to do with their business. It's an immediate red flag, right? They should be, I believe, they should be focused on their business. Especially if they're going to take my money or our money. So it's the team and the leader. And it's called TIME, right? So the T in TIME is team, the TAM. So we do due diligence on the TAM, the total addressable market. How big is the market that they're going into? The terms. So we do call it due diligence on our terms. We're checking the terms, like, well, what price are we getting in for this company, right? So the terms. And then the traction. So this is the other thing. So we do due diligence on the track. We're looking at their financial statements. We're looking at their growth. And that's something that they're not going to be able to fake, because we're going to see their financials and we're going to see how they're doing and how they're performing. So that's the T. The I is investors. So who else is co-investing, right? And they're doing due diligence as well, so we're partnering with them. The M in TIME is the moat. So or their business model and moat. Do they have something that's competitive? So we do due diligence and say, well, who can come in and easily or not easily attack this company and win? The E is energy and excitement, right? Startups are hard, or they're like extremely, extremely hard. And so, you're doing due diligence. Does this person have the endurance, the energy, the excitement to really drive this thing? And then the 2 other things about time that we do diligence and we check on is how the founder is spending their time, right? So you can look at what they're doing and how they're spending it. Are they, you can really dig deep there. And then the last part is like time, or the time value of money. How fast will my investment work investing in this company versus an alternative, right? So it's that time value of money. So that's a bit of the way we look at due diligence. We also look at the last 3 investor reports. So because a lot of times these founders, you'll invest in them and you don't hear, they get the check and you don't hear a damn thing from them for a while. And so we say, okay, well, let's look at your last 3 investor reports to get a sense of how they communicate to their founders and what they're communicating, right? So those are some of the things that we do. I mean, there's background checks and all that kind of other stuff, but those are kind of sub details under what I laid out there.
That is incredibly helpful. So and it's great to hear that. I think about, again, I'm relating back to Alpha, because in a way it's its own little mini startup here in Colorado. And yeah, you're right. I think fortunately we have the benefit of a large organization of Alpha National supporting us, but we are checking in with our local partners, giving them updates, because that is important to them. They do want to know, how is their money Where's their money
They're
going?
investors, like they're investors in you, right? They want to see, hey, how's it being sent? How are you growing? What are you doing with it? You know, maybe like,
100%.
and hey, you might ask, likely you're going to ask for more money, right? So that it helps there.
Yeah, you want to tell a good story and say, and if we had more, then we could do more. So no, I totally get that. That's really, really good to hear. Armando, I want to flip that. So when you're pitching to investors, what do you think founders often misunderstand about what investors actually want to see?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, you know, and David, thank you for sharing again that overview too. Again, it's a beautiful insight into the workings of how VC specifically works. For anybody who's on the call, right? For folks who've explored and thought of launching something, creating something, my experience has taught me a really interesting concept of the fundamental difference between a small business and a startup. These are different things, right? So like small businesses, you're not a startup founder if you're building a small business. You may be in the startup phase of the business, but the vehicle, the entity itself is not classified as a startup. There's distinct characteristics that are part of these different ways of thinking about how one might go into business and like launch a business. And it's really important to know and understand like what the game of startup is, right? And that has a very specific kind of rule set and structure around it, right? It's kind of like, I hate to use a sports analogy, but it's knowing what sport you're playing, right? Like football is different than competitive swimming. You know, it's like these are different games and they have different requirements and they have different expectations. So the first advice that I have for any founders, potential founders, is know what business you're in. Understand what it is that you're doing. And some of those characteristics is that a small business is about creating, you know, revenue and being able to live from something and an idea. It has scalability perhaps in mind. Maybe it doesn't in that way. A startup is specifically and intentionally designed to come out of the game, to like 10x, you know, 100x, you know, return, 10x return, like scalable, right? We're talking about systems of scale in startup, right? It's like how many people can we engage and move in this business venture? So number one is knowing the difference between those things, right? Like we can live off of ideas and off of business concepts, but a startup game is about like maximizing, really playing in capital and capitalism, right? Fully. The other thing to know and understand is that what I've experienced is that a number of my ventures have had a social impact lens to it. And I've explored with this concept around wanting to do well by doing good, you know, like to be able to merge these things. And sometimes that can create a distraction in the VC space, in the venture capital space, because it is about the return and it is about the scalability. That is the generally like orienting kind of value system and goal and objective of the vehicle that is a startup, right? So like, again, knowing what business you have, you know, and being able to do that. That's not to say that you can't do well with startups, but what I've found is that the doing well part is absolutely secondary, tertiary, like it's much further down in the priority system. What I would recommend folks, those playing in startup, is matching the value system with your funders, knowing and understanding who your funders are. If your funders are looking for high returns, and if you don't have a venture that is necessarily that's not the right space. And the inverse is also true, right? You know, in those ways, folks who are investors who are looking for maybe a more social impact, if it's just explicitly a business venture, and it's about generating revenue and capital, then like there's a mismatch. So being able to research and really understand the multiple classifications and styles and values and priorities of investors is like a critical first step, right? Is being able to know and understand who is it that we're like speaking with and trying to match and understand that. And if one chooses to do the startup space, traction, being able to demonstrate and show that there's movement And there's different ways of showing traction. It could be in, engagement in a platform or an app. It could be kind of, David talked about the TAM, right? The total addressable market, right? Really knowing and understanding what is your market, like where are you playing? What is the arena that you're playing in? I also really highly recommend folks generate your own revenue. Like, prove it, like prove the model, prove that people are willing to pay. Generate your own revenue. When you generate your own revenue, you have a different negotiating stance when it comes to investment and when it comes to, talking about like what the investment terms are. So what David mentioned is, what are the terms of this agreement? What vehicle are we using? Are we using a convertible note? Are we just focusing on angel investment? Are we, like knowing and understanding what are the vehicles and the mechanisms for investment is also really, really important. And getting super intimate and clear as to what your business model is, and having like these rings here, those like knowing what the core of your business model is, but then understanding what these other rings of how you generate revenue. Because as David mentioned, to see the resiliency of a business, if you build a whole business explicitly just on one thing, that maybe it's a unicorn, and maybe it's an untapped market, and maybe it's a space. And also, like, there's a lot more competition, and there's people with bigger dollars, and there's a lot more, people that can just like bump you out of the market and like take that market. So what do multiple revenue streams look like? What is a diversified, not too diverse to where like you don't really understand what the business model is, but diverse enough where you're generating revenue through creative means in that way. Which all points me to that product market fit, like you hear that all the time, and understanding your value in that and being able to move forward.
Thank you, Armando. So I to like synthesize all you shared, right? It's doing your own due diligence of investors too, right?
Yeah.
And I think about the advice that we sometimes get, even as leaders, or for those of us like myself who are in corporate spaces, of understanding who are you working with, what kinds of relationships, and you have to understand it, the different stakeholders that you are engaging with, so that you can show up and gain their trust, and you understand what they need and what you need. And in that assessment, right, we hear that a lot, the EQ of understanding all the different needs and dynamics at play, and being honest about that. And I think about what you shared earlier, which is the objectivity of being a founder, of not just getting so focused on what you're building, but being able to be truly objective with what it is that you are starting, and having an honest assessment of that, and then finding the right investors for that particular venture or mission or whatever it is that you're building. So thank you for sharing that.
To add a small component to that, because I have seen, I luckily haven't experienced it, but I have seen and had friends and colleagues who had a mismatch in their investment portfolio and their investment priorities. And with that, really lose control of their business, right? Like really lose control of, because part of taking on investment means diluting your ownership stake in your company, right? Like you are giving percent ownership, in different ways to the investors in this way. And depending on how you're diluted and depending on what vehicle you're using, I've seen founders fundamentally lose agency over like their idea and their concept. And for somebody who's just in it to like make money, then like that might be okay, that might be fine. But if there's a deeper attachment to like a value system, or so like something, a vision specifically that you're trying to execute, then again, knowing and understanding what it is you're building, right? Is it a small business or is it a startup? And knowing what the stakes and what the arena and the game of that is, and matching the investors in that, because there's risks involved in that.
100%. Thank you, Armando. We, in the last few minutes here, I'm going to ask one more question to each of you. It's the same question, and then we will turn it over, because I think we have some great questions coming in from the audience. So final question before Q&A, which is, how do you see Latinos shaping the future of entrepreneurship and investing? And I guess it's two questions. And what's one action that you want our audience to take after today's conversation? So it is two questions, but would love to hear both of your answers on that.
So look, we're in Hispanic Heritage Month. we've made amazing contributions to this great country. Where we still have opportunities to grow is to grow, call it the startup venture space, right? And we need to grow more investors that are putting their capital in, that are getting these great returns, that are learning about this, educating ourselves, right? Supporting these startups, supporting our communities, creating jobs in our communities, creating wealth in our communities, in our communities and for our country, right? So, I see that. What was the second part of your question?
What's one action? We're going to give
Oh,
our audience some
oh,
homework. They have to take an
thank
action
you.
after
Look,
today's.
the action, look, so increase your competency on this asset class, right? It is an engine of growth. It's one of the things that makes America the innovation capital of the world, right? So one is increase your competency in this asset class and venture. The second is, and selfishly, become a member of Angeles Investors. We have a couple membership classes if you want to be kind of an associate member and learn and be on the network, or if you want to actually come in and invest, be an investing member. So we'd be honored to have those who are listening to become members of Angeles Investors. Come with us on the journey.
Thank you, David. Armando, same two questions to you. How do you see Latinos shaping the future of entrepreneurship and investing? And what homework do you have for our audience?
Nice. My response to the first question would be, I think entrepreneurship and creativity and offering solutions in the world, I think, is inherently part of what the Latino experience is all about, right? Especially in the United States, but across the Americas. Per capita, the Latino community has some of the highest numbers of family-owned businesses, entrepreneurs in that way. Now, again, entrepreneurship is like this big umbrella, and family-owned businesses, restaurants, tax companies, insurance companies, like all of those different like entrepreneurial ventures are small businesses that exist in that. So I would echo what David mentioned, is like in the startup space, and again, the startup being a very specific class of business, we're grossly underrepresented, and we have major barriers to access the capital in that space. I think the latest statistic was like less than 5% of total VC dollars go to founders of color in that way, and less than 0.5% go to women founders of color, right? So like we're talking about the trillions of dollars that are invested in startup, and what is our access to those dollars in those ways? So in terms of how do I see Latinos shaping the future of entrepreneurship, is to being able to know and understand that distinction, is to center in that entrepreneurial spirit and express it, beyond family-owned businesses and those kinds of components into the startup venture space. I think there's ample opportunity that responds directly to the needs of our community and the broader community, the country as well too. We are inventors and we're creatives, and we bring tremendous talent. As for the second question, what action do I want to invite our audience into for today's conversation? As the founder on this phone call, as the builder, the person who creates things, biggest piece of advice is just like, what does it look like to get your idea? Because you hear ideas every day. Everybody has a million ideas. Distill it down to like the smallest little kind of prototype, like little test, and just kind of start to experiment with what that test is, like just put that in front of people, get some feedback, create a little mock prototype, using AI. How many AI tools can we just like create a little landing page of some sort, but test and iterate on your idea, and you'll learn so much in that process that will support you beyond the idea phase, because we can often just kind of get stuck in the idea. I have this idea. Oh, it'd be amazing. Okay, let's convert that into actionable steps and start to put something in the world that people can interface and engage with, and start to show you some information that you can make choices about and adapt and start to follow or let go of, and pivot to something else. So I challenge the audience, put your ideas in the world, go for it.
Take the risk.
Yeah.
It's okay if you fail. It's part of the process. Thank you both again so much. Like I said, I want to answer some questions. And again, for those questions that if we don't get to your questions, connect with our guests, join Angeles, So with that, we'll pick a few of the questions. So the first is, if someone only has the capacity to invest in 1 or 2 startups a year, how should they choose which ones?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that they're in a group. Well, you do your own due diligence. If I had to choose, and then you gotta have your own thesis, but lean towards what you know. Lean towards where you can help that startup be successful. You look at your network, you look at what they're doing. Wow, I can really be helpful to that startup. I think prioritize it that way, and also have build mentors with us, with our group. You get to see who else is investing. So that's what I would I would do your own due diligence, see where you can help the founder the most, invest in what you know to the extent we're not I don't know everything, but that's what I would say.
I appreciate that. And it sounds again like through Angeles, you're already doing a lot of that due diligence. So to your point, you're likely the opportunities that are coming to your members and investors have had some level of due diligence for them, an investor to say, any of these are fine to pick and choose from. That's great to hear. This one's going to be, I think, probably more for Armando. But of course, David, please chime in if you have a response on this one. So the question is from Alejandro. What type of vehicles do you recommend to minimize the risk of dilution that I think you mentioned, Armando, through the various investors?
Yeah, no, Alejandro, great question. As I mentioned earlier, first and foremost, generate your own revenue. Like make money. Find out how to acquire the dollars, like get the dollars in the transaction, right? Find that way. It's important in a lot of ways. We're also exploring, in terms of traction, we do live in an economy now that's an attention economy, so if that's a part of your business venture, like really understand like where do you bring the most value and how can you like start to generate traction and movement on that. In terms of investment vehicles, I would say like do everything you can before taking on investment. Angel investment is amazing. Friends and family round, Kickstarters. You have so many different types of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding platforms and processes where friends and family can invest, and then you can provide and give some sort of prize or feedback or a reward in that sense. In terms of actual taking on investment, there's a couple vehicles. There's a convertible note, there's a safe, and then David, if you would remind me of there's a third one that a lot of the AI companies are exploring right now.
There's price, convertible notes, safe notes. There might be others. So tokenization. I mean, there's interesting things that are coming, but
yeah.
So there's a lot of different vehicles, and there's like new and emergent vehicles that are exploring right now too. But those oftentimes you see why.
Yeah.
There's all these different and new ones. So like do the research and find out like what's most relevant to your business model.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you. And with that, folks, I know, David, you have a hard stop. So I want to just say thank you again, David, Armando, so much for your time, your insights. I know I learned a lot. I am not a founder, but you've inspired me to think maybe I can be, or even an investor, or both. So with that, truly thank you. And to our audience, on behalf of Alpha Denver and Angeles Investors, thank you for joining us. We hope you also feel inspired to take that next step, whether that's exploring angel investing with Angeles or pursuing your own VC entrepreneurial journeys. So again, thank you. Follow Alpha Denver and Angeles on LinkedIn and across our socials to stay connected, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.